George Carlin. I mean, when you hear that name, you probably think of a comedy legend, right? A free speech icon, a guy who told it like it is. But there's a really provocative essay out there from a source called the Appalachian Guerrilla that paints a completely different picture. So in this explainer, we're going to break down this seriously contrarian take on one of comedy's most reviewed figures.
Right out of the gate, the author sets a super aggressive tone. This makes it crystal clear that this is not going to be some loving, nostalgic tribute. No, they're here to tear down a cultural monument, and they're not pulling any punches.
So this really gets us to the heart of the matter. Was Carlin the hero we all think he was, the guy who bravely spoke truth to power? Or, as this source argues, was his influence actually something way more corrosive, something that was actually poisoning the very culture he was critiquing?
Okay, so before we dive into the critique, we really have to get on the same page about the popular, almost mythic status that George Carlin has in our culture.
For most of us, he's the ultimate counterculture hero. This is the guy who famously went to jail for saying 7 words you couldn't say on TV, which basically cemented his legacy as this pillar of free speech. He was seen as this fearless voice of reason, especially during crazy times like the Satanic Panic. This is the George Carlin that most of us think we know.
But the Appalachian Guerrilla drops a thesis that is the polar opposite of that popular image. The author's whole point is that we've fundamentally misunderstood Carlin's real impact on society.
And here is where you see the two views just collide. So where most of us see an anti-establishment hero, this author sees a deracinated suburbanite, basically someone totally uprooted from their own culture. Instead of a comedic genius, they see a man who just flat out hated mankind and life itself. That pillar of free speech? Nope. The author calls him the OG of making Marxist talking points mainstream. And the anti-war rationalist? Recast as someone who was just anti-men, anti-society.
So how in the world does the author build this case? Well, they lay out this multi-fronted attack, going after his comedy, his philosophy, pretty much the whole shebang.
First up, the attack on institutions. The author argues that Carlin's constant jokes about the church and government weren't just edgy comedy. They call it a 40-year assault. And they don't stop there. They draw a direct line from Carlin's rhetoric to what they see as the decay of those very institutions, arguing they were left weakened, and even pointing to things like transgender pastors and tattooed deacons as the end result.
Next, the author claims that Carlin had a special kind of venom reserved for masculinity. They literally say he tore down men and manliness every chance he got, and that he just hated jocks and athletes. The argument is that Carlin's whole vibe appealed to this middle manager bugman archetype, and that he even made terms like sports ball popular, just to mock and put down traditional guy stuff.
And finally, the author claims Carlin was essentially an ideological Trojan horse. They call him the OG of making Marxist talking points mainstream. How? By popularizing ideas like framing white people as shameful immigrants and painting white men as these uncool quislings or woman beaters. The source says this wasn't just jokes. It was teaching people to hate themselves, all leading up to Carlin's famous belief that humanity is just a plague upon the earth.
So, in the author's view, Carlin isn't just some figure from the past. No, they argue his philosophy created this direct line, a kind of lineage that you can see shaping our culture right now, today.
The author breaks this down into 3 steps. Step 1 is Carlin, the source of it all. Then you get his disciples, people like Bill Burr and Joe Rogan, who the author claims are all about abstract freedoms, but not the actual people. And the final step? It's an entire aesthetic, the contrarian hipster look, which they connect to everything from Steve Jobs' turtleneck uniform to the millennial with his man bun.
Now, this word is absolutely key to the author's entire argument: deracinated. It means to be uprooted from your own culture, your own heritage. And for the author, this is it. This is the whole ball game. They argue Carlin wasn't just some outsider looking in. He was an uprooted man who then taught generations of people to also be disconnected from and even ashamed of who they were.
The author doesn't end with another jab at Carlin. Instead, They close with this really powerful metaphor about two completely different ways of looking at culture and civilization.
First, they lay out the philosophy that they pin on Carlin, which they sum up with a quote from Nietzsche: "If a pillar can be knocked down, it should be." This is the worldview that's all about testing, challenging, and, yeah, even destroying things just to prove that you can.
But then, the author immediately counters that with their own philosophy. I say if a pillar is falling, you should secure it to support the roof. You see the difference? This is a call for preservation, for shoring things up. The argument is that if you just keep knocking down all the pillars, sooner or later, the whole house, civilization itself, is going to come crashing down.
And that leaves us with the really crucial question at the end of all this. What is the role of the critic, the comedian, the thinker? Is it to constantly test our society's foundations, even if it risks collapse? Or is the job to protect those pillars, to preserve the structure that we all live in? It's a question that goes way, way beyond just one comedian.